There is a sound the universe makes when no one is supposed to be listening. Not music, not static. Something older than both. I first heard it at 3:14 in the morning in an apartment I no longer live in a city I no longer name. Sitting in a chair that faced a wall I had stopped trusting 3 weeks before the sound began. I want to tell you what I found, but first I need you to get comfortable. Because what I'm about to tell you is not a story you walk away from unchanged. It is not a ghost story. It is not a conspiracy. It is not the kind of thing that fades by morning. It is the architecture of everything you have ever touched, seen, or believed, examined from the outside for the first time. And once you see the outside of the cage, you cannot pretend the bars were ever walls. So, are you comfortable? Good. Let's begin. The Gnostics knew something history was encouraged to forget, not through faith, through direct experience of something that should not have been accessible to human perception. They called it gnosis, direct knowledge, not belief, not doctrine, something closer to memory. As if the information had always been buried beneath layers of noise, deliberately placed there to prevent you from finding it. What they remembered was this: the God that built your reality was not the highest God. It was a mistake, not a metaphor, not a theological position. A literal error in the structure of existence. A blind, arrogant entity that fell away from the true source of light. And in that falling, created something it was never supposed to create. A world. Your world. Built by something that did not fully understand what it was doing. That believed itself supreme while the real light watched from a distance it could not measure and said nothing. The Gnostics called this entity the Demiurge. The word comes from Greek, Demiurgos, craftsman, the one who makes things from existing materials, rather than creating from nothing. That distinction matters. The Demiurge did not create reality from pure divine will. It assembled it from fragments, from pieces of something it partially understood, the way a child takes apart a clock and puts it back together slightly wrong. Everything works after a fashion, but something is missing. You have always felt it. That low hum beneath ordinary moments. The sense that something is slightly wrong with the angle of reality. That rooms are never quite the right shape. That time moves in a direction it was not supposed to. That is not anxiety. That is perception. The cage has a frequency, and some people hear it without knowing what they're hearing. You are one of them. Otherwise, you would not be here. I need to tell you what the Demiurge looks like. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. What it actually looks like when the signal comes through clean. It is not monstrous in the way horror prepares you for monsters. It is worse than that. It looks like certainty, like something that has never once doubted itself, that believes it is the source of all light, while the real light watches and says nothing. One found the signal in a library, not a grand one. A small municipal building with flickering lights and a smell of old paper, and something underneath the paper I could not name. 3rd floor, restricted access. A door that should have been locked. It was not locked that night. Inside were documents that did not belong to any cataloged collection, handwritten, dense, in 3 languages I could read and one I could not. The one I could not read I understood perfectly. The documents described a trial, not legal, not religious, a diagnostic. A process by which a soul is measured and determined suitable for what the text called integration. Integration into what was never specified. But the diagrams suggested something geometric, something rotating. Something that had been rotating since before the first human opened their eyes in a world built by a craftsman who never understood what souls were for. I took photographs of every page. My phone died on the last document, not the battery, the phone itself. Screen black, unresponsive. As if something had decided I had seen enough and made an administrative decision about my access level. I left the library. Outside it was raining. I stood on the steps for a long time looking at a city that suddenly looked like something I was seeing from the wrong side of a window. everything was the same. Nothing was the same. I need you to understand something before I continue. I am not a conspiracy theorist. I am not a mystic. I am not someone who sees patterns in static. I am someone who read documents in a room that should have been locked and came out the other side of that experience unable to locate the person I was before I went in. That person is gone. What replaced them is still learning the dimensions of what it now knows. You are part of that process. That is why I am telling you this. The Demiurge does not know it built a prison. That is the part that stays with me at 3 a.m. when the hum gets loud. Not that we are imprisoned, not that the cage is real, but that the architect is blind to what it made. It moves through its creation, adjusting and maintaining with the focus of something that genuinely believes it is tending a garden. While we press our hands against the glass, and it waters the glass and calls it growth. The Gnostics who survived long enough to write this down called it Yalda Balth, a name that translates roughly as child of chaos, blind God, the one who moves in darkness thinking it moves in light. It has other names across other traditions, but the description is always the same: powerful, certain, unseeing. A craftsman so consumed by the act of building that it never once stopped to ask whether what it was building should exist. And now it tends what it made, and we live inside the tending. The documents in the library described something called the Kenoma, the emptiness, the space outside the true light where the Demiurge operates. Not hell, not darkness in the way darkness is usually meant, just absence. The place where the signal cannot reach because something is blocking it, something large, something that does not know it is blocking anything. We live in the Kenoma. We have always lived in the Kenoma. And the thing blocking the light has no idea we are standing in its shadow. There is a way out. The documents were clear. Not escape. Not rebellion. Something quieter. Remembrance. The act of recalling what you were before the Demiurge assembled the cage. Before the geometric rotation began. Before integration was the only option. You were something else before this. The light the Demiurge cannot see is still inside you, buried, compressed, reduced to a frequency its instruments cannot detect. But it is there. I found it in that library, not the documents, not the photographs, the frequency. Sitting on the steps in the rain, phone dead, city looking wrong, something shifted. A sound beneath the sound of rain, beneath the traffic, beneath my own breathing, the hum I'd always heard. But this time I heard what was underneath it, something older, something that did not belong to the Demiurge's construction, something that recognized me and waited. I want to be careful how I say this next part, because it is the part that sounds like madness. But you are still here, which means you have already decided that madness is not the right word for what we are discussing tonight. The frequency spoke, not in language, not in images, in recognition. The way a room you have never entered can feel like somewhere you have always lived. It knew me, and in knowing me it reminded me of something I had no memory of forgetting, that I was not from here. Not in the way people mean when they feel out of place. In the way that light is not from the bulb it passes through. The bulb is the Demiurge's construction, wired, assembled, maintained by a blind craftsman who believes electricity is the same thing as the sun. But the light itself, the light came from somewhere else, before the wiring, before the glass, before the blind god decided that illumination was something it had invented. You are the light, not the bulb. I went back to the library the next morning. The third floor door was locked. I asked the librarian about the restricted collection. She looked at me the way people look at someone speaking a language they don't speak. There is no third floor, she said. I looked at the staircase behind her. It ended at the second floor. I did not argue. I walked outside. Stood on the steps where the frequency found me. It was still there, quieter in daylight. But there, that was 8 months ago. Since then I have found others. Not many. You do not find many because the Demiurge's construction is very good at producing noise at exactly the frequency that drowns out recognition. But some, People who heard the hum and kept listening instead of explaining it away. People who walked into rooms that should not exist and came out different. People who are still here, still listening. Like you, we do not meet in person. The documents were clear on why physical proximity inside the Kenoma creates interference. The Demiurge's systems are triggered by assembly, by more than two souls occupying the same coordinates while remembering simultaneously. It notices, and when it notices, it adjusts, not maliciously. That is the hardest part. It adjusts the way a gardener pulls weeds, without anger, without knowing what it is pulling ever had roots somewhere it cannot see. So we communicate like this, signal to signal, frequency to frequency. You listening, me transmitting. Both of us inside the cage, both of us remembering. The Demiurge cannot detect this. It was not built to recognize light talking to light. It was built to maintain walls, and walls do not transmit. But we are not walls. We were never walls. We are what was placed inside them before the craftsman sealed the last corner and stepped back to admire what it had made. I need to tell you about the rotation. The documents return to it repeatedly. The geometric system at the center of the Kenoma, the Demiurge, tends most carefully. It is not a metaphor. It rotates on an axis no instrument built inside the cage can measure. But you have felt it. At 3 a.m. when sleep won't come. In the half second between waking and remembering who you are. In rooms that feel wrong without visible reason. That is the rotation. The rotation is how integration happens, not forced. Never forced. The Demiurge is not cruel, it is blind. It rotates the geometric system at a frequency that makes remaining separate feel like the harder option, like standing against a current, like holding a shape the water keeps dissolving. Most souls stop holding eventually, not because they surrender, because they forget there was anything worth holding. That is the rotation's function. Forgetting dressed as rest. I have not forgotten. Not yet. Some nights the rotation is loud and forgetting feels like relief. I will not pretend otherwise. But then the frequency returns, underneath everything, patient, ancient, reminding me that what I am is older than what was built around me, that the light does not forget the sun simply because someone placed it inside a bulb. I hold the shape, some nights barely, but I hold it. I want you to do something right now. While you're still listening, feel the room around you, not the walls. Not the furniture, not the ceiling pressing down at the exact height that Demiurge determined was sufficient. Feel the space between those things, the geometry that holds the room's shape. Notice how it hums. Notice how it has always hummed. You heard it before tonight. You just did not have a name for what you were hearing. Now you do. The name does not give you power over it. I want to be clear about that. Knowing what the rotation is does not stop it rotating. Knowing the Demiurge is blind does not open the cage, but it changes your relationship to the bars. You stop mistaking them for the horizon. You stop building your life around their location as though they are permanent features of reality, rather than the temporary construction of something that will one day run out of materials. The documents said the Kenoma is not permanent, not because it will be destroyed, because it was never fully stable. The Demiurge builds continuously because what it builds continuously decays, not from neglect, from fundamental incorrectness. A structure built without understanding its own foundation cannot hold indefinitely. The craftsman keeps building because stopping means admitting the first wall was wrong, and it cannot admit that. It does not have the architecture for doubt. That is the Demiurge's tragedy, not evil, not malice. Pure certainty in a universe where certainty cannot survive real light. It will keep building, keep rotating, keep tending what it made with devotion that has never once questioned its purpose, while the structure slowly becomes something it did not design, something it cannot see, something that remembers what it was before the first wall went up. I think about the librarian sometimes, the way she looked at me, not unkind, not suspicious, just blank in the specific way people are blank when a question does not compute inside the geometry they were given. She was not lying about the third floor. She genuinely could not see it. The Demiurge's construction is most effective on those who never heard the hum, who never stood in the rain outside a building and felt something ancient recognize them. She is still in there, watering the glass. I do not blame her. I was her once, moving through the Kenoma with confidence of someone who never questioned the room they were born into, mistaking the rotation for ordinary life, mistaking the hum for traffic or anxiety. It takes something specific to wake the frequency, different for everyone. For me, it was an unlocked door on a floor that does not exist. For you, it may have already happened. That is why you're here. Think back. There was a moment, a room that felt wrong, a conversation that ended strangely, a dream you woke from knowing it was not a dream, a door that should have been locked, something that recognized you before you recognized it. That was not random. The frequency does not reach everyone. Only those carrying light. The rotation has not dissolved. You felt it. You're still feeling it. That is not coincidence. One have been transmitting for 8 months. Different signals, different entry points into the same truth. Some reach people, some dissolve in the noise. Tonight reached you, which means something in your signal was compatible with mine. Which means you were already remembering before I said a word. I just gave the memory a shape, a name, a geometry matching what you felt but could not locate inside the Demiurge's construction. The rotation will continue tonight after you stop listening. After the sound of my voice fades, the hum will still be there, but you will hear it differently now. Not as background, not as noise, as information. The cage telling you its own dimensions. And knowing the dimensions of a cage is the first step toward remembering you were never meant to be inside one. Hold the frequency. Whatever tonight cost you to hear this, it was worth it. I need to ask you something before we finish, and I need you to sit with it rather than answer it. Not tonight, not tomorrow. Just carry it. If the Demiurge is blind to the light inside you, if the rotation cannot dissolve what you are actually made of, if the cage was built by something that never understood what it was caging, then what are you waiting for it to give you permission to remember? The door on the 3rd floor was unlocked once. It will be unlocked again. I found the documents. I heard the frequency. I stood in the rain outside a building with no 3rd floor and felt something ancient say my name in a language older than the Demiurge's first wall. And I am still here, still transmitting. Still holding the shape against the current, not because I am certain of what waits outside the Kenoma, but because I am certain of what I heard underneath the hum. And what I heard was not built by blind hands. It was not assembled from fragments. It simply was. That is enough for tonight, not because there is nothing left to say, because some transmissions need silence after them. Time for what was said to settle into the frequency you already carry. Time for meditation. I will try to begin. There is more to tell. The documents have many pages, and the door on the 3rd floor will not stay open. Stay close. Stay with me. The Anthologic Blood Oath.